All right. Would someone like to volunteer for note taking? I guess I was supposed to ask that before I clicked record.
I can take notes.
Awesome. Thank you, Frankie. Great. So with the designated note taker done, I don't see any new faces here. I'm going to skip that one and we can move on to reviewing the outstanding project level RFCs. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we can take a look at what we've got there. So I'm seeing these two. I think we talked about this consolidating all RFC text into a single location last week. Emily, is there something else I need to do to get this merged?
Oh, sorry, I'm just behind. I thought I approved this one already. I will approve it now.
And then I wrote this one up after our meeting last week and some other discussions. The general idea behind this emeritus status is that we've got some folks who've, life changes happen and they've like kind of migrated away from the project in terms of their, interest in contributing or maintaining. And so the governance document outlines basically methods for removing a maintainer. I think those rules mostly apply to situations where someone's maybe done something malicious or counterproductive for the project and is being like a remove for kind of a negative reason. I think what we wanted to outline with this emeritus status is basically folks who are just stopping in their contribution to the project, but should probably be recognized in some sort of honorific way as having, reached a particular role or status on one of the teams from the Paketo project. So just outlining specifically what that looks like. For the most part, it's the same kind of rules as you would see for removing a maintainer or a contributor or a steering committee member. But then there's this addition of adding them to the team's roster as a, an emeritus, whatever their particular title was. So, emeritus web servers contributor or something along those lines. Do folks have questions or concerns about this RFC?
Should we also, I don't see anything right off the bat about reinstating people. Is that something we also want to include here? If life changes happen and they come back or they're interested in the project again, would they just have to go through the regular promotion process all over again?
I would think so.
Okay.
There's also something else that's like maybe not outlined here, which is like maybe someone, for example, like because of the fact that a maintainer is maybe like a level above a contributor, maybe someone wants to still be at the contributor level, but maybe not have the like responsibility or kind of maintainership. So like there should maybe be some outlining of like a demotion process where like folks can move from maintainership down to contributor position. But that might be a different RFC than this one.
Well, but I'll accept the word demotion.
Yeah, I did also wonder, also not seeing that here, how long we want to wait before initiating this mechanism for moving somebody into an emeritus title. Like, at what point do we consider someone to have not contributed enough?
I'm not going to put anything in the RFC that kind of outlines this. I think the folks who are on those teams, like the maintainers for the teams, have a pretty good sense of the fact that someone is or is not involved in the project anymore. So I'll let them like make that kind of particular call.
Cool.
I think in an ideal world, most people would enter emeritus by voluntarily retiring because they know they're not going to work on things. And the other mechanism is just an escape hatch if we like literally can't get in contact with someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want this to be any sort of fight. I think like it more likely makes sense that like, someone's like, I'm leaving the company I'm currently working at and I won't have time for this, or, the side project that I'm using this for is gone to do something different. So I'm just like not really involved in Buildpacks anymore. So like I'm, at that point, like it makes sense to move them. I think people should be able to like arguably contest it. So you as a maintainer should probably reach out to the individual involved if that's the situation, and ask them if they'd like to be moved into an emeritus position. But yeah.
Another one I can imagine is, someone leaves the company where they're working on this, but they believe that they would like to continue maintaining it sort of as a hobby project. And then eventually they discover they don't have time. Maybe we can reach out and say, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Would you like to be emeritus, or are you planning on coming back? It's not like our intention is to try to kick people out, but more to prod people to accurately reflect their status.
Yep. Things like, pruning the set of maintainers on a given sub-team also opens up new positions or opportunities for other folks to kind of like step into those positions. So yeah, it's worthwhile like making sure folks aren't just like filling a seat when they don't necessarily need to be there or really want to be there.
For example, like the different ways I've contributed to the CMB project have changed over time. So I asked to become an emeritus maintainer on platform specifically, because I've been focusing on other parts of the project. And there are certain responsibilities that come with different sub-team maintainerships, like approving RFCs and stuff. So I get out of the way of folks who are actually focusing more on PAC, for example.
Okay. Yeah, so this one's still open. Feel free to comment, leave questions, concerns, make, suggest modifications. And I believe that was it. Those are the only two RFCs I'm seeing at top level. Looking at the language specific RFCs, I do not see anything in our search. And okay, we've got one item that was just added to the agenda. Does someone want to speak to this web framework support in the Python build pack?
Sorry, before we move on, I had one question about one of the outstanding project level RFCs that I'm sorry I didn't get to when it was up. And it was the first one around consolidating all of the RFCs into, it wasn't an RFC, it was the consolidating all of the RFC text into a single location. There was discussion about potentially consolidating literally all of our text into one RFC location. That would be all the language specific stuff as well. I assume that's not part. I mean, I can see that that's not part of this. Is that something that like someone would want to someone should put an RFC forward to do?
I was late to this meeting because I was trying to get my RFC up, but I didn't get it done in time to consolidate it. I think I took the action item from the last meeting, and thank you, Frankie, for suggesting we take minutes so I could double check exactly what I had said I would do. To both put up a proposal to split out the meetings and split out the RFCs. So
perfect.
I haven't done it for this week, but it'll definitely be done for next week.
Thank you.
Okay. Then yes, does someone want to speak to this web framework support in the Python build pack item?
Yes, I wrote this one, and I may have answered this looking through the docs, but just wondering how like web framework support works in like the re-architected build packs, so like Flask, Django, whatever. Could I just use whatever package manager I want just to install the tool via like pip or poetry or whatever?
Yeah, that's the general idea. We don't yet have plans to do a similar breakout system for different architectures like we do for Ruby. That might be something we look into in the future. So have something like a Flask build pack or a Django build pack. I think those also have their own unique like asset pipelining structures as well. similar to Rails. So that might also be something that we look into. But yeah, currently we just dump you into a REPL by default. Otherwise, you can pass a proc file.
Awesome. That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. That was the last item on the agenda. Does anyone have anything else to discuss before we call it?
I have
Fantastic.
one last super quick one. I was talking to Emily and Ryan over Slack a little bit. One thing I'm wondering is if it makes sense to switch the homepage fields in all of our build packs to point to the Paketo docs, just so it's easier for like whoever's using the build packs to see our docs and things. I was considering just putting together an RFC or something like that, but just curious if anyone has thoughts on this.
I generally like the idea. For Java build packs, I don't feel ready to do it yet because there's some information in the READMEs about certain configuration values that aren't all reflected in the docs. So I feel like I would need to expand the docs to have reference sections that are more comprehensive before I would want to direct people there. But I think as an end goal, it's a good idea. Specifically, in my mind, the alternative was to basically make the GitHub README essentially a copy of the docs, and like we could set up some automation, and maybe we should do that anyways. But I think it would be still, even if we did that, better to link to the docs because it's easier for people to discover other content than it is in Google. I mean, not Google, GitHub.
What if we so we have like kind of two levels of build packs, right? We got the implementations and then we have the family sort of meta build packs. The way that the docs are laid out right now, I think it would make more sense for the meta build pack tomls to have their homepage point at the docs and maybe keep all of the implementation homepages pointing at the repositories. That way, I think you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get very specific documentation if you're using very specific, and by very specific documentation, I mean the code itself, if you're using specific build packs, but you get the overall build pack documentation if you're using the build package, the meta build package, that is.
I think there's like a couple problems with like this homepage link and like connecting it to docs in general, which is like one of the ways that this is surfaced. I don't think that the non-Java build packs do this yet, but it's probably something we're going to start doing, which is print the actual homepage link in the log output. And one of the things that doesn't happen is the CNB specification doesn't surface any way for you to do that for like a meta CNB. So at the very top of like, say, a meta CNB, you can't, even though you're running a group that belongs to a meta CNB, you can't say like, oh, this is part of the Ruby CNB. Let me print the link to the docs page for Ruby. Instead, what you would just get is, individual implementation build pack docs links that are connected to their implementation build packs. I think this is kind of currently confounded by, we are in the middle of like trying to figure out if there's a better way for us to like organize and manage our documentation, just because of the fact that like a lot of the work that's going on results in like pull requests to multiple locations across the Paketo like repository structures. So you're going to make a modification to a particular build pack, and then you also have to go and modify docs on the Paketo website. Like, are there ways that we can like organize the structure that make more sense? I think maybe ultimately what like a good goal might be is like we have docs that exist in all of the repos where you're actually referring to what is actually like in the repository itself. So like implementation build packs have their own kind of like implementation reference documentation that's inside of the repo, and that their homepage can link to that. And that language families are then, their links are at this like higher level of kind of like use cases and like ways you go about like using that particular build pack, but they're like much higher level documentation and don't include what is currently on the Paketo build pack, which is like, or on the Paketo website, which is just kind of this like amalgamation of all of the features that you could possibly use in a given language family. So I think like overall, like the doc situation is actually kind of complicated at the moment, and I would say we're not really in a good position to make a decision about where the homepage should link, because we don't really know where our doc should be.
That is very helpful. Thanks. I think perhaps before me writing RFC up or something like that, let's think about the doc stuff a little more. I know Frankie's looking into some of it with the Hugo modules and things like that. So perhaps after that, I'll put something together for this.
I agree with all of that, except that the reference docs would only live in GitHub. I feel like there shouldn't be documentation that's in GitHub, but not the website. But we could come up with some structure in the website to like reflect a reference section that's not like the high level overview.
Yes, I think this is what like Frankie has been like kind of working on a little bit of a sketch of the pain points around this, but like my imagined idea is that the GitHub repository for say like an implementation has reference documentation for that implementation, and that we use then Hugo modules to basically like symlink those documentation inline into the websites. Then when we like deploy the website, it's there on the website. So it's in both locations in sync. So you can look at the GitHub repository and see the reference documentation there. You could also look at the website and see it there.
Okay, that makes more sense.
That was like,
the first time I liked that idea a lot. I think it'd be great.
I think we need like all of this kind of stuff. I think you need it in both locations because folks might navigate to either one of those locations to look at documentation. The other part is you need both high level kind of language family, meta CNB level kind of use case documentation, talking about ways to use the build pack, types of applications. And then you also need super low level, here's how you can like, change this particular configuration option. And currently it's like, the docs are in a totally different place than the implementations and the language families. And we've like mixed together like use cases and configuration reference documentations. Like, I think we need to just like try to untangle a lot of this. And I don't know, we should hear from
100%.
Frankie. Frankie's done like more work than anyone and just trying to like gather some of the pain points around this. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it. I honestly would, maybe I'll put something on the agenda for the next working group meeting and like give people some forewarning about it. I'd love to collect feedback from like people who actually rely on our docs, like people who are more like Buildpacks users / early contributors, to understand like what their needs are. Because I think right now the people here have a good sense of the pain points as docs maintainers and writers of docs. And there's lots of stuff that we can do to improve our experience. And I think that's a separate problem from separate, but interlinking the problem of presenting the docs in a useful way. And so if we can get a good sense of like a goal state for our experience as writers and users' experience as readers, hopefully that can inform like the automations and organization that'll make the most sense. I'll take it as an action item to like prepare something for next week.
One thing I think we can do as well is use projects that have been learning through years as a shortcut in some ways, so we don't have to rederive everything from first principles. Like I know I particularly feel inspired by the Spring Boot docs. What I like about them is like I can read through the overview section and it includes some of the most common high-level configuration options, but then there's like a complete appendix. So I like that they sort of bubble up the most important things without not being complete in its totality.
And I think this kind of gets at the like multi-layered documentation concept of like, there are definitely these like high level almost kind of like how to or tutorial or use case driven documentation. And then there's like reference level documentation of like, exactly, I want to know about this particular environment variable and how to set it and what are the values that I can set it to and what that means for this particular build pack. And I think you need both.
One thing I'll say about the home pages is that I don't think it, after Kasha brought this up, it made me want to go look at like how much traffic we're getting on the GitHub repos, sort of as a proxy for how many people are looking through for docs through those homepage links versus through other mechanisms. And it's enough people that I feel like we should think about it, but it's pretty small compared to another number, the amount of traffic going through Paketo.io overall. So I don't think it's like, 70% of our traffic is going to GitHub because of these homepage links, and we should turn the gate and point them all the other way. I think it's enough people to be worth thinking about, but it's not the majority of people, if that makes sense. It's like on the order of, for some of our most popular build packs, like 90 people going to the GitHub link versus on the Java build pack, like 1,400 people going to Paketo.io. So.
Okay. Any more thoughts on this subject? It sounds like we'll have more discussion in a future working group meeting. So if you think of stuff, come to that meeting. Anything else left on the agenda that folks want to discuss? All right, I think we'll call it here then. See y'all next week.